When you play the Game of Thrones,
Subscribe and like.
you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, welcome back to the Grease Goblins YouTube channel. Today's video, we are going to be talking about a theory that I thought was kind of introduced in a History of Westeros podcast I was listening to, kind of about Maester Aemon's life, and they brought up some interesting points, but didn't really go that much further into it, about Bloodraven and the possibility that he was actually killing certain Targaryens so that the line of succession would be more secure and the people ruling would be able to actually keep the Targaryen dynasty alive. Now, I want to provide just some information to show how ruthless Brynden could be in terms of keeping the Targaryens in power and all of those things. So we're going to actually start at the end of what I want to talk about in this video about kind of the line of succession, everything from 209 AC to 233 AC, starting with Baelor's death, leading all the way to the Great Council where Aegon V is elected to become the new king. So in 233 AC at the Great Council, Aenys Blackfyre, the fifth son of Daemon Blackfyre, basically wanted to put forth his claim, try to throw his hat in the ring, and do it using, his voice and speech instead of fighting in battle. Well, Brynden Rivers says you can have safe conduct. This seems a little too suspicious, and we know what happens next. Aenys Blackfyre arrives, he's imprisoned and executed by Brynden. Shows how brutal Brynden was. Yes, this was a Blackfyre, but this is a person that Brynden, never knew. This is somebody that was completely innocent, and he still kills him ruthlessly to secure the Targaryen dynasty to continue, not the Blackfyres. You want to go even further than that? If Brynden did actually rediscover, through probably Aerys' reign or around that point, if he did figure out during Aerys' reign, or even maybe a little bit further with Aerys, about the idea of Aegon's dream, it would make a lot of sense that he would be focused in on having the Targaryen dynasty last the longest possible. And so I want to go through the insane amount of deaths that happened within the span of only about 20-ish years during the main Blackfyre conflicts. And I want to point to a couple that I think are very suspicious. Now, I'm going to give you the whole timeline, and then I'll talk about at specific deaths, which I think are very suspicious. Of course, as we see in the first novella, again, spoilers, there will be a lot of spoilers for A Knight of the Seven Kingdom characters or people involved in that story, so if you don't want spoilers, click off the video. But in 209 AC, Baelor dies to Maekar. It would seem, it's not 100% confirmed, but it seems like, yes, Maekar was the person that hit his brother and killed him. So Baelor was the heir to the throne at this point, being the eldest son to Daeron the Good. And so now the heir ended up being Valar, the oldest son of Baelor. Now, unfortunately for the Targaryens, within 1 year, 209 AC, Baelor and both of his sons, Valar and Mataris, would die. And Daeron himself would also die somewhat after all of those deaths, it would appear. So again, I don't think there's anything too suspicious here. This seemed to be, again, just sickness and illness, things that, again, were affecting the mass population. Doesn't seem to have anything to really do with Brynden, but we're going to start getting there very shortly. We then know that Aerys I becomes king, which is actually really good for Brynden, because one, Aerys is somebody that's very bookish. I actually think that Brynden and Aerys would have gotten along quite well, and just besides the point, Brynden basically becomes the king. He's the person operating, and so a lot of good things happen here, right? You have somebody that, Brynden can work with in Aerys, somebody that Brynden probably would have liked, and also he basically has the full power of the Targaryen dynasty at this point. But we see a number of questionable things happen within the next few years. So if you're taking a step back, the Targaryen dynasty was in a really weird spot. Aerys was somebody that was not having children. He really had no interest in women or anything like that. So you knew that once Aerys died, you were going to have a problem, because the next heir to the throne would be Rhaegal. Now, Rhaegal was someone that was considered crazy. Like, he would go around, naked, and he was just a crazy guy. We don't know all that much about Rhaegal, outside of we know he was pretty much insane. So, not somebody you want on the Iron Throne. And, funny enough, 6 years later, this problem solves itself. Rhaegal Targaryen dies choking on lamprey pie. Now, I did a video this week that was covering the purple wedding and kind of how it was supposed to be an accident. That is what is said by George R. R. Martin, that was the implication. They wanted it to look like an accident, but it turned out, not doing that because of really Cersei. So here, it's the same idea. Choking on a pie, that's something that people thought Joffrey did as well. It's only when Cersei pointed out that it was poison that people started reacting differently. And so this very easily could have been covered up. George R. R. Martin, in that quote that I used for that video that I'll probably have up on screen, he says, again, in his world, there's no Heimlich maneuver. There's no, set way of dealing with someone choking. So choking is actually a very serious, health issue here, right? It's not some simple fix. And so Rhaegal's death can be passed off as, an accident, an incident. But when you put together all of the accidents that are going to happen in the following years and the deaths that happen, it seems like, okay, maybe an isolated issue, a coincidence that he dies and it's needed for the Targaryen dynasty. But when you put it in a vacuum of all these other things, it becomes more suspicious. Because only 2 years later, Rhaegal's son Aelor is killed apparently in this freak accident by his sister wife, Aelora. Again, the source material does not really elaborate on this. We don't know what is meant here. Again, you have to think also that Aelor at this point, I'm assuming because he was married to Aelora, had to have at least been probably 14 at this time. How does this freak accident happen that you literally kill your brother? So again, very suspicious. Another accidental death apparently. But could there have been some foul play involved? Could some magic have been used on Aelora? Could Aelora have been warged to kill her brother? Because again, with Aelor out of the way, and Aelor again was still a young kid, it wasn't, again, we're not told, much about his personality, but he easily could have taken after Rhaegal being more insane. Aelora apparently accidentally killing your husband/brother. A little suspicious. Did she have some crazy genes in her or mental issues? We know she has mental issues going further after this, but a little suspect. So after Aelor's death, the crown or heiress, more likely it was Bloodraven. Now, this is a kind of a weird point given the fact that I'm going to almost argue that there's a lot more suspicion that Bloodraven could have had Aelora killed as well, because he is the one that probably named her heir. But at the same time, you can understand why, because if you then skip over Aelora and go to somebody else like Maekar, it, again, might split the family, and you don't want to do that during this time of the Blackfire Rebellion issues. So maybe the plan was, okay, maybe we would dispose of Aelora or pass over her at a later date. But either way, between the year 217, which is the year that Aelor died, and 221, Aelora is attacked at a masked ball. Now, it doesn't kill her, but there was an attempt on her life. Why would you attempt to kill Aelora? A girl that probably, was in her teenage years, you would assume around that area. Yes, she is named the heir, but again, if you're somebody that doesn't like the Targaryens, killing Aelora is actually a bad move because you think the next heir is going to be named as Maekar. Now, it could have been Rhaegal's third child, but she was way too young to be named the heir at this point, in my opinion. So why would you try to kill her? It makes no sense unless it's maybe, okay, somebody that was close to Aelor believed that Aelora did it on purpose and they were trying to get revenge for that. But he could also be chalked down to Brynden Rivers, somebody that had spies. This was the height of his power during Aerys I's reign, could get her out of the way so that he could make Maekar the king, somebody who Maekar and Brynden Rivers didn't necessarily get along, but Maekar would have been a source of strength against the Blackfires, something that was needed desperately at this time. He is the best candidate to go through then his line, the best potential king. It's very likely that this could have been orchestrated by someone at court and maybe even Brynden Rivers. Now, it's interesting because even though this doesn't kill her, it pushes her to later commit suicide. The attempted assassination attempt plus her killing of her brother, she ends up dying. And so at this point, the heir is named Maekar Targaryen. It makes the most amount of sense. Rhaegal only had one more child that was a girl, and she was quite young at this point. And so you then would go to Maekar. So Maekar makes a lot of sense given that this that the kingdoms needed strength at this time, and it also would have unified the two, I think, growing family issues, right? Maekar and Brynden Rivers were kind of not on great terms. Maekar believed that he should have been the hand of the king to his brother Aerys, and so we see him kind of brooding at Summerhall. It's really discussed a lot in the novellas. And so this kind of, to me, is almost a reunification of the Targaryen dynasty. But it doesn't necessarily solve the issue. Now, Maekar already had kids, so yes, there were heirs to choose from for who was going to go next, but none of them were really that great of candidates, at least his first two sons anyway. And so when we get to this time period now, it's going to be very interesting. Because in 221 AC, Aerys I dies at the age of 49 as his brother Maekar ascends the throne. Again, living to 49 actually is not a bad year at all for this world. I don't think there's anything suspicious about Aerys' death, at least from Bloodraven side of things, because Bloodraven would have probably really liked Aerys, and also Bloodraven was at his most powerful during the reign of Aerys. But at this point, Maekar ascends the throne in 221 AC. Brynden Rivers is still the hand. That's something that's very important to understand. Brynden keeps his position. But we see a number of deaths occur soon after. Daeron dies anywhere from 221 to 233 AC as he dies from a pox, leaving only one daughter, Vaella, who was born in 221 AC. So Vaella would have been extremely young, especially when Maekar ends up dying. So she's not going to be a great candidate for becoming the next heir to the Iron Throne. But either way, that's kind of what Daeron leaves behind. Now, Daeron's death, I don't think is too suspicious either, given his lifestyle and the way that we see him, visibly age in the source material. That's what's described. He was a very deeply disturbed person because of the dragon dreams and things that he was experiencing, the alcoholism, things that all affect someone like maybe Robert Baratheon. But getting to the next big event. Now, this is the one I find very suspicious as well. So Aerion decides to drink wildfire. And yes, Aerion is cruel. He's not the smartest guy in the world. But what led him to drink wildfire? Kind of weird, right? And so I think it's very easy if Bloodraven maybe would have suggested something like this, or had somebody suggest it to Aerion so that Aerion would try and turn himself into a dragon. Because at this point, if Daeron dies, Aerion is the heir to the Iron Throne. That cannot happen. Aerion would be a horrible king. He is basically another version of Joffrey, right? Now, I will say, to Aerion's credit, he's more skilled as a warrior than Joffrey was, but still, Brynden Rivers would have saw this coming a mile away. And so I think he easily could have gotten rid of Aerion, having someone inform Aerion that, oh yeah, you could become a dragon if you do drink this wildfire. Aerion then drinks it and dies. And everybody would just chalk it up to, oh, Aerion's kind of crazy, he's kind of an idiot, he's not well loved whatsoever, so who's going to really investigate it? It's another, oh, this looks like an accident, but if you look deeper, could be a little bit more nefarious. Now, Aerion would only leave behind a young son who had been born that very year named Maegor. His wife was actually Rhaegal's last daughter, so there is an interesting little claim there that maybe, the heir could be Rhaegal's daughter and then Maegor, but it doesn't seem like a really good route either. So you can kind of get to this point now where we're at the main part of it, where we're at 233 AC. How do you come to this point where who is the next heir? And I think the peak rebellion, in a lot of ways, was to take out Maekar, to try and bring down the Targaryen dynasty, or at least weaken it, or at least it was a staging grounds for the Blackfire rebellions. Because the result of the peak rebellion almost feels like a targeted hit on Maekar. Now, Maekar puts himself in the front of battle, which is a really not a great thing. Like, yes, it's great that you're willing to fight for your men and your country and all these things, but you're the king, your, line of succession is extremely fragile, and he ends up dying in the peak rebellion. So that leaves a huge issue, because Brynden Rivers now has to call for a great council to decide the king. And I believe that Brynden Rivers probably wanted Maester Aemon to become king. I very much believe that, because if you look at, what we know about Maester Aemon, people were approaching him to become the king. It's the reason he goes to the wall. I think Maester Aemon is somebody that Brynden Rivers would have looked at and respected, because he is a very wise character. He is somebody that would have made a great king. He is somebody that could have stabilized Westeros. Whereas Aegon V is somebody that wasn't really able to ever balance the public. He wasn't able to balance the small folk with the merchants, the upper class, the high lords. He was not the best king for Westeros. Now, was he a good one for what he did for the small folk and things like that? Was he a good person from what we believe? Yes. But Aemon would have fit into that much better. And so I think Brynden Rivers definitely could have been somebody at least campaigning people or, again, spreading his influence, kind of the way Littlefinger does, like telling other people to spread things, to spread the idea of Aemon becoming king. But around the same time, like I opened the video, Aenys Blackfyre comes over. He was promised, peaceful passage and to be able to participate. He is imprisoned and killed. This is Brynden Rivers effectively manipulating the way this Great Council would have gone. Would Aenys Blackfyre have won? That's an interesting question. Maybe it's a question for another video because, again, Aegon V was not viewed all that well, and their other candidates were either female, they were too young. Outside of Maester Aemon, again, Aegon was really the only choice, but if you introduce Aenys Blackfyre, who there was a lot of people that still, liked the Blackfyres, this isn't all that long after the first Blackfyre Rebellion, it could have gone very differently. And so I look at all that, and I take a step back, and you go, okay, all of these events, all of these deaths in the span of only about, 24 years? We covered about 24 years worth of time, and think about how many people die. And there's so many just little incidents here and there that seem to occur that are supposed to be accidents, but they don't feel like accidents. It feels like a targeted version of getting the succession to a place that was safe. And unfortunately, if you're Brynden Rivers and you're looking at all the, the candidates, the good ones, or at least the competent ones, seem to die of, natural causes or things like that. So for instance, Baelor dies to Maekar. Even Valar, I think, could have been a solid king. He dies to the spring sickness. Rhaegal's children, who knows about them? Getting to Maekar's line, all the people that wouldn't have been good kings die very early on. So let me know what you guys think about the theory that Bloodraven could have very easily been manipulating the Targaryen line of succession. Do you guys think Brynden had it in him to kill his own kind of family, the Targaryens? I would point to the idea that he definitely does. Now, when you get this line, that he tells about Bran of a brother he loved, I am somebody that subscribes to that was Daemon Blackfyre. And if that is the case, again, Daemon Blackfyre would have grown up, with Brynden, almost kind of like an older brother type maybe scenario. And he killed him and his sons. Brynden is somebody that if you study his motivations, he is somebody that always puts the results before how you get there. He is somebody that doesn't care about the means all that much as long as it gets what he wants to happening. I think that's very relevant here. But what do you guys think? Do you think Bloodraven was doing some very suspect activities, maybe with Shiera? Or did the Targaryens have some unfortunate years within 209 and 233? But I will see you guys all next one. Bye, guys.